So thank you very much to all of you for attending this panel session, whose title is Conservation and Restoration of Cultural Heritage, Western and Eastern Approaches. Actually, we have a lot of very high-level technical people here with us, but we will all try not to be too technical in order to really have a more concept-oriented discussion. So I present Dr. Irina Bokova. He's a Bulgarian diplomat and international cultural policy leader. She served as Director General of UNESCO from 2009 to 2017, where she positioned culture at the heart of peace building, sustainable development, and post-conflict recovery. Her tenure saw strong advocacy for heritage protection in crisis situation, and she was working a lot for the fighting against illicit traffic of cultural property. She's widely recognized for her role in promoting culture as a global public good. Then I would like to introduce Professor Francesco Bandarin, who is an architect and urban planner, internationally known for his work on cultural heritage and cities. He served as director of the UNESCO World Heritage Center, who deals with the World Heritage sites that you know, and later has been Assistant Director General for Culture at UNESCO. He's a key contributor to the historic urban landscape approach and the author of several major publications on heritage governance, including his most recent book, Changing Heritage. He currently teaches and writes on urban heritage, conservation theory, and global heritage policy. We have then architect Usman Sami. Some of you might know because he's from Lahore. And so he's an architect and is the president of ICOMOS Pakistan. ICOMOS is the International Council on Monuments and Sites. Is an international NGOs of professionals dealing with monuments and sites. And he is a practicing conservation architect. He's actively involved in heritage protection, policy advocacy, and professional capacity building in Pakistan. His work focuses on the application of international conservation principles in complex local context, particularly in relation to historic cities, archaeological sites, and traditional construction techniques. Then we have Mr. Tauseef Ahmad, please welcome him, who is a senior development executive and has been heading the Aga Khan Trust for Culture in Pakistan since 2021. Previously, he worked as director for the Aga Khan Development Network and a senior engineering advisor for USAID Pakistan. Mr. Ahmad has also served in Central Asia, besides carrying out several small stints in Germany and China. He also writes blogs on cultural heritage and has published 2 books. Then we have a pleasure to welcome to Pakistan architect Weise, who is the former president of ICOMOS Nepal and has played, so ICOMOS, the same organization as I was saying before, and has played a central role in post-earthquake heritage recovery in Nepal following the 2015 earthquake. His work emphasizes community participation, traditional building knowledge, and resilience-based conservation strategies. He is widely recognized for his contributions to rethinking post-disaster reconstruction and living heritage approaches in South Asia. So you see that we have with us very high-level technical people who deals with the conservation, preservation of cultural heritage. And I will address some questions to them, speaking about how the conservation of heritage can be understood nowadays in such a complex world, in such a complex situation where differences sometimes are put behind and in front the common scope and goals. So we try to really discuss examples also of global references framework, which are, of course, including local knowledge and respect for the living heritage and community-based practices, but also how to see with the different kind of approaches and also from other countries, how this kind of approach has been put in place. So without losing other time, I start with the first question to Dr. Bokova. So during your leadership as at UNESCO, the protection of cultural heritage, including world heritage, was increasingly framed in relation to dialogue, peace, and sustainable development. How do you assess today the role of the World Heritage Convention and the guiding principles in accommodating cultural diverse approaches in conservation, particularly behind the Western canon? Please.
It works, right? Yes. First, let me say how happy I am to be here in Lahore, a city with a long literary, intellectual tradition, a city of music, of art. And I remember once, it's the first time I'm here, albeit I have been in Pakistan in my previous position. And I remember a phrase that stick to my mind, saying that if you have not visited Lahore, you have not lived a life. So at my more than 70 years, I start a new life being here, and I'm grateful to Lahore and to all of you. And also because Lahore is a UNESCO creative city of literature, with this long tradition. Lahore is, of course, has an incredible heritage, including World Heritage sites, and I'm very eager to discover this. And I think that with all this tradition and understanding here in this incredible city, I think it's the right place also to discuss issues of heritage, of culture, and to look at the evolution, I would say, of this incredible concept that was brought by UNESCO in the convention, even, of course, started before, but also to look at all the contribution of culture broadly to people's lives, to development, to peace, to reconciliation, to peace building. And if I can come to your question, it was a time indeed when I was Director General of UNESCO when culture came to the forefront of world politics for a bad reason, for a very negative, I would say, reason. It was the rise of violent extremism. It was the destruction of emblematic cultural sites. And I remember that I was talking at different conferences with different people, and there were those who were telling me, why are you so excited? Why are you insisting? Culture has always, in destruction of heritage, and culture has always been a collateral damage in conflict and in war, isn't it? And yes, they're right. But what we confronted at those times was deliberate destruction. It was destruction that was targeting identities of people. It was not just humiliating them. It was just creating a space where these people did not have their roots. They did not feel motivated, that communities were destroyed because of that. And it was a moment indeed, as we said, to put the dots together between peace, security issues at a higher political level, protection of heritage, trafficking, financing of extremism, and I would say broadly to say to the political leaders that, you know, something deep is in danger. And if I may share here, I remember the first time I went to the United Nations, to the Deputy Secretary General. I went to speak to the Secretary General of the United Nations in those times, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who was very supportive, and I went to see this Deputy for Political Affairs. He was very kind, but he didn't understand why I'm there. He said, it's the first time I'm meeting Director General of UNESCO, because in the minds of people, UNESCO was about beauty, aesthetics, art, something high, maybe for the elites, but not that much ingrained in people's lives and identities. And then gradually we started working, and of course Francesco is here, and I would like also to pay tribute to him, all the partners, Agahan, ICOMOS. We started working in order to elevate and to pass this message that culture may not bring peace, but without culture, peace is not sustainable. And this is where it was so important to start working and to leverage all the big potential of the conventions, of the World Heritage Convention, of the Intangible Heritage Convention, which also was not considered very important at that time. And we have seen that with time, and I will stop here, there were important decisions by the Security Council of the United Nations, several resolutions adopted, and of course, the last one, which I think is, we consider to be a historic resolution, 2347, adopted in March 2017, where for the first time, the Security Council recognized protection of heritage, fight against illicit trafficking, diversity, linking it with cultural diversity in this world as something really important and meaningful for peace globally. And then, of course, there are many other examples, and maybe later I could share. It was in Mali, of course, peacekeeping operations where they started training about protection of heritage, and there was really kind of a global movement. It ended with the campaign Unite for Heritage that we launched for the first time as a social network campaign where more than 10 million people were bringing their experience, sharing, protecting it. So we started at that time, our ambition was to create a big movement about why culture and heritage matters. I stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bokova. Indeed, culture is considered as a basic need, which was really something that changed a little bit the approach and the attitude. So now a question to Professor Bandarin, who has been, of course, so much involved in all those achievements. So having been closely involved in shaping the operational guidelines of World Heritage Convention, how do you see the balance today between universal conservation standards and cultural-specific interpretation of authenticity, integrity, and management, which of course are part of the convention main subjects? And in your view, how have UNESCO, ICOMOS, and other advisory bodies, publications contributed to broaden conservation approaches over time?
Well, thank you. I love an easier question than that, because that's very complicated, especially if you touch one of the, say, nerves of the World Heritage Convention, of heritage in general, which is this clash, between a universal value system and, of course, the respect to diversity. Even UNESCO is sometimes taken in this contradiction, because it supports universality, but it supports cultural diversity, and not always the two go together, as Irina knows very well. And this has been a problem since the beginning, I would say. The convention was signed in 1972, and I always thought that it was the conclusion or point of arrival of a very long cycle of reflection on what heritage is or should be for society and so on. Mostly, and I think you probably agree with this, mostly done within the European culture and European context. That's not a negative judgment. It's just happened. It's just historical. Heritage was born in Europe after the French Revolution. It developed in Europe when the nation states became the most important political formation in the 19th, 20th century. So it's something that is historical. At the same time, there was a push to transform this concept, which we could say regional, into a universal system. And the convention did exactly this, it created a universal system of values. The moment you adopted this system and all the related charters that our friends from ICOMOS produce almost daily, the system became to crack. How can you apply the Charter of Venice to the world? It's impossible, even if you respect the Charter. By the way, I'm from Venice, so I can speak about the Charter of Venice. Even if you, want, it's impossible, because the Charter of Venice is really a cultural product of that time, of that place, of that kind of thing. So, since then, we had, in a very contorted way, I would say, sometimes even without full recognition of the issue, many attempts to fix the problem. And then we had the inclusion of cultural landscapes in the convention, and then we had an ARA conference to say, yes, authenticity comes from the bottom, doesn't come from the top. And then you had the Burra Charter for the Asia region, Australia, which says, it's all bottom up, it's all societal significance. So if you look at the history of charters, of ICOMOS charters, and even I would say the contributions of UNESCO, because you mentioned the historical landscape, it's all an attempt to fix this dystony between these two systems. I don't think it's possible, frankly, to find a universal solution for one simple reason, that heritage has developed essentially as what I call a package. It's a package of values, not one thing. Because, take your mosque, for instance, the Bashari Mosque. Yeah, it's ICOMOS censorship. So for some people, it's like us, we saw this morning as an amazing piece of art and architecture. But for other people, don't see that. They see other values, spiritual values or community values. So we have to accept that heritage is a package, and there is no way you can easily separate these two things, these different things. So I think that one way that we may find to sort of address the issue, which is, by the way, has been very weakly defined in the World Heritage Convention, is to give a lot of weight to interpretation. Because at the end, what is heritage? It's essentially a narrative. It's a story that you tell around something physical. Not necessarily a beautiful thing, could be very, very bad. I mean, think of Auschwitz, and it's not a nice place to go. But it's not a nice place to go, Auschwitz, but it's a very important narrative. So the narrative is very important. Who produces the narrative is the key point. Very often in the World Heritage Convention, we are examining now case by case, you have this situation in which the narrative is produced by a government or a set of experts and so on, forgetting many things that belong to this package, communities, stories that have happened, even even individual or visions of things. So the narrative of the convention tends to be a little bit top-down. So we have to address this issue and perhaps correct this aspect of the convention in order to correct this dystony between universality and the respect of cultural diversity. It's not easy, but it can be done with a little bit of work, and I think there's been already some good attempts at that. Were you asking about ICOMOS and UNESCO writings? Yeah, of course, they're very important. Yeah, we do it. We work for that, so they're very important. And of course, there's been a lot of improvement in the quality of text and everything. And now we even have a set of manuals that are done jointly with them, on the management of the convention. And I think this is the direction to go. But again, unless we try to involve more, say, facets of society in the creation of the narrative, this dystony will not be fixed.
So the importance not to have a universal solution, but really to try to remember that there are those diversities, and people who are in charge of this local heritage should be consulted, understood, and listened and considered. So now I ask a question to continue with the International Council of Monuments and Sites, ICOMOS, so to Usman Sami. So ICOMOS has been central to developing international conservation approaches, as we were saying, through the charters, the principles, advisory, technical support to the World Heritage Committee. So from your experience in Pakistan in particular, how do these global texts translate on the ground? So how have you seen, which kind of tensions or synergies you have seen on the ground in Pakistan?
So in Pakistan, we're still at an initial stage of applications, even though we're all aware of the texts, because a lot of the heritage conservation work has always been done by, government services and departments. The use of the text has not been widespread, and a lot of factors have been overlooked for most of, since the conventions and the charters, etc., came into effect. But they're really important because it gives us a baseline to work with. I keep having conversations with Guy about them, and he has been struggling with the universality problem, where things don't apply the same way to contexts like ours. But where we haven't, in a situation like ours, where it's still not that widespread, the usage is not that widespread, the baseline is actually very helpful because you can start with something and then we can start struggling with it.
Thank you very much, Usman. So actually, we need to adapt those tools to a local context, actually. So, sorry. Now a question to Mr. Tauseef, Khawaja. So the Aga Khan Cultural Services have implemented conservation projects in World Heritage Sites and also in non-World Heritage Sites that strongly emphasize community participation and socio-economic development. So in what ways does this practice of having those both approaches challenge or enrich conventional conservation models promoted through international guidelines and publication? So how do you balance the two?
If we see the practice of conservation, which Aga Khan Cultural Trust of Culture started in Pakistan was around 35 years back. So it's been its fourth decade now, and it was led by mostly people from North America or Europe, Germans and Italians and others, and people from MIT. So it started purely Eurocentric way, purely Western approach of authenticity and care for the materials and scientific principles and approaches and scientific data. So it was religiously followed, but whoever were the people who started it, they showed a lot of good intelligence that they connected this work with the locals, with the residents, and with the direct beneficiaries. And if I look at it, this was, of course, an intelligent way forward. But it was a need also because the sites were so remote. You go to Khaplu, you go to Shigar, it's in the middle of nowhere. So you needed all that. You needed it to make it a people's project for its sustainability, for its operations, for its long-term living, remaining as a living site. So that's the first thing we have to understand. But what I see in the history, for example, if we take any project in the north, which was in the beginning, let's say Khaplu, you see how it connected with them. A very generous decision that was made by the Aga Khan network at that time and the people involved, that we have to convert this building into a living resort or hotel or something, because otherwise there will be nobody to maintain it, and imagine the heating systems and cooling systems and machines and sprinklers and fire just at the base at the base camp of Siachen. Yeah? So you're talking about thousands of miles away in a very harsh climate. So so decision was change it that way so that it remains a live site. And the generous decision that was made that whatever earning will come, 30% hard cash will go to the people living around it. So they made town management societies. That hard cash that was flowing to the town management society, that resulted in the buying, in making of schools and various projects. And the other important thing, you see, it's a need and it's a planning also. They developed a great food supply chain around it. All the dairy products, all the poultry, fruit and vegetables. That would the local community will grow it around that's in that area and send it to sell it to the hotel. So hotel is getting something very quickly, easily, and the people are earning money out of it. And then all there's indirect benefit. So coming back to your question, that primary approach was purely Western, purely Eurocentric, purely monumental, and they didn't what we call the general insistence of Eastern approaches of spirituality and traditions and custom. They didn't tailor that in their way to actually conserve the monument, but for its operations, for its long-term sustainability. Now you cannot imagine, or you cannot think of that monument in the middle of nowhere at the base camp of a glacier without the people around it. So it actually complemented each other, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. So actually, the role of heritage for sustainable development involving the local people. So now a question to architect Kai Weise. So Nepal's experience with post-2015 earthquake recovery at heritage sites has raised important questions about authenticity, reconstruction, and continuity. How had the World Heritage Convention and ICOMOS informed these processes, and what lesson can we draw for rethinking conservation approaches? So apart from what ICOMOS or UNESCO might say and have said, so what happened? So is there a non-Western context, in a non-Western context, how this was working? Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, it's wonderful to be here. We spent some time in Peshawar and we visited Taktibai, and then we went to visit Taxila, and we visited all 18 sites that make up the World Heritage Property. How many of you have visited the 18 sites of Taxila? Because some of them, very few people actually know where the caves are, and Saraikola was another place where it was difficult to find. So but what I wanted to say was the first time I came to Pakistan was after the 2005 earthquake. It was a few years later, organized by Aga Khan. It was the Safe School Conference. And so we had gone up to the area where the earthquake had caused most damage. And what really was obvious was that a lot of the traditional buildings, even when they were quite badly damaged, they didn't collapse. And the modern buildings, actually, the ones with the concrete, they collapsed. And the problem isn't the concrete. It's that these buildings are sort of in this transitional phase of use of modern materials, but not really properly built. So again, this East-West thing is not a question of good and bad materials, but it's really a question of what is appropriate and to what degree have we actually understood the materials and its impact, especially in a case of an earthquake where, of course, everything is tested to its extreme. So in Kathmandu, again, we were sort of preparing and looking at the region because we know that we have big earthquakes. And in Kathmandu, we had the big earthquake in 2015 causing a lot of damage. A lot of monuments, we had about 1,000 major monuments that were either damaged or collapsed. The question is, how do you deal with authenticity where what approach do we take when there's so much damage? And in this connection, we had a lot of discussions. And, the question is, do we leave it? Of course, we can't. We needed to do something, which means we rebuilt. Now, rebuilding as such in sort of the Western concept of conservation is as such not considered sort of acceptable. However, you need to justify it. Now, I think here, again, the big difference we need to understand is not that there's a good and a bad way. I think we need to understand that in certain circumstances, we need to follow a certain way, while other circumstances requires you to deal with it in a different way. And for example, going around Taxila, we clearly understand it's an archaeological site. The communities are not directly related to the archaeology, which means someone needs to take responsibility. And this approach to an archaeological site without the community, without the original use of this site, requires a certain approach where you protect the site. We make sure that the information that it expresses is not changed, diluted, or misinterpreted, which means that the Western concept of conservation protection is valid. This is of course, you can still argue it, but is valid for an archaeological site, which again has already lost its sort of connection to the communities. On the other hand, a living site where we have, mosques, temples, buildings, museums that are being used, there we need to find a sort of a slightly different approach where after damage, we had to go back and rebuild. Now the question is, how do we rebuild? And that is the big question that we discussed. What is appropriate? And I think that will lead to discussions, what is appropriate. However, there are 2-3 things that one has to take into account. One is if there's continuity with the use and you have a community linked to it, we must make sure that that continuity is supported, that the communities actually take that responsibility. We're there to support them in ensuring the continuity. So we help them rebuild, restore the monuments, and that was our main challenge. The question is, it's not that easy to decide who is the community. It gets very political sometimes, but we need to try to find those who really would be the ones. And the other big discussion is, of course, in connection with finding the artisans and those who can actually do it. So I think that was our main focus, and that was sort of the basis for construction after the earthquake. I've spent the last 10 years doing this, and it's been a long process, but it's been fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing also an example from a near country. Continuing with this subject, to another question to architect Usman Sami. In the context of Pakistan, so conservation frequently involves negotiation with historical authenticity and practical constraint and contemporary needs, the use that might be of contemporary. So how do you approach decision making when technical best practice comes into tension with local reality or expectations? It is a little bit a continuation, but more Pakistan oriented. So how is the situation?
So I mean, my personal views aside, the cultural notion of protecting something in let's say this area is that people expect it to be renewed, which almost always means that they want it to look brand new. and that in general, you know, there's a fine line as to where that should be stopping, but usually that line gets crossed and you start losing authenticity in the manner of how the texts speak. But then again, the question is, what are we working with? What kind of property it is? What kind of whether it's a monument or something. So the usage should also maybe determine that. But other than that, I don't think the question of what's authentic pops up much outside of professional circles. And maybe that's something to look towards as well. Because we might need to find a middle ground somewhere with what public perceptions are. I'm sure Dr. Tauseef is familiar with this, where people come and look at this project that they've been working on for 5 years, this picture wall, and they say, why haven't they done anything? Because they've been doing it more or less how it should be, but people expect it to be completed.
Usman, to be honest, you are very diplomatic in saying that. It's actually much more difficult situation. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah. I think mine is still on and his isn't.
No, but I just finished my comment, that you have presented a situation which could actually cause a lot of disruption and a lot of difficulties for the practitioners like Aga Khan Trust. To be honest, if you allow me, what we have seen, Pakistan is not even at any level with respect to the professional understanding of heritage and its conservation, especially. The knowledge threshold is not even at a satisfactory level. We don't have universities which would teach heritage. We don't have, there used to be some courses which have vanished over the time. So you have to bring a fresh architect to your site and train them on the scaffolding, with getting their hands dirty for at least 1 year, 1.5 years before they can actually understand. The theoretical and academic discussions are many, around charters and, impact, and that's not. But what you call a scientific preservation way, scientific way of conserving the sites, understanding it, in a way that should be acceptable to the world, we are far behind in that, far behind. And Usman said very rightly that conservation in Pakistan would mean 90% redo, 90% reconstruction. And there are various reasons for that. And we should be, it's not a criticism, it's an acceptance. It's an acceptance of who we are, where we are. And I think more we understand it and more we deviate from the academic philosophies and dimensions and discussions and go into the real world of learning this trade. That is, I think, which is required.
Thank you. Actually, you have answered to the question that I wanted to ask you, so thank you so much. You have raised the issue of the education and the need also to revise curricula in the universities, in the schools, to have really more adapted and really ad hoc, let's say, approaches, and having practical also in the field. So not only theory in university, but also experience in the field. So continuing, architect Kai Weise. So another question for you. Behind technical choices, post-disaster risk construction also depends on governance and community involvement. So from your experience in Nepal or in any other country, because I know that you have worked in so many countries in the region, how have local communities and craft people shaped the reconstruction processes? So how they were, let's say, asked their view and how they have been involved, and what lesson have you learned from them? Thank you.
I'll sidestep slightly and then I'll get back to that. But I just wanted to also, in connection with sort of the comments that were made, when we look at, when you define heritage, this is sort of a very broad definition. It is something we get from the past. So it has to have a history which we define and understand. It needs to be of value. So the question is, what kind of value? You have to define the value. And because it is of value, you have to preserve it for future generations. So I think whenever we look at heritage, it needs to have all these three components. And if we miss out on any of these three, then we don't have the heritage anymore. And I think that has to be clearly understood. And it's also a question of, is there intent to maintain your heritage? Or is it something else that we're doing? And I think we need to be clear. So it is something we get from the past. But the value, what value are we actually trying to maintain, keep, protect, and what are we actually passing on to the next generation? And I think that becomes very important. Is it something else? Or is it how do we understand that value? And I think that becomes the key point, and there's this continuity that is extremely important over time. And I think that continuity, there are certain means of ensuring that. And one of them is, of course, when you have a community linked to the heritage, they're the sort of the bearers of the value and ensuring that it's passed on. And especially in earthquake areas, we need to constantly maintain our heritage and in certain cases rebuild it. So we need to have the skills and the craftspeople and the knowledge to actually ensure that this is passed on. And very often it is the skill that is the continuity and the link over time. And I think that is something that we found, of course, after so much destruction, we had to, of course, also focus our sort of justification of what we are doing, linking it to supporting the craftspeople. And we often saw that the craftspeople were not provided the sufficient respect, and it was not acknowledged. And we were really trying to push, saying that they're the ones who are actually doing this, and they're the only ones. We can theorize, we know everything theoretically, but in the end, we depend on them to actually carry out these restoration projects. Without them, it's impossible.
So, again, the importance of the transmission of the knowledge, of the skills, of the technical knowledge of people living around the site. So changing subject, we go back to Professor Bandarin. So in your work on historic urban landscape has profoundly influenced how we understand urban heritage beyond monuments. But in your recent book, Changing Heritage, how internal tension and external pressure are threatening our cultural and natural legacy, you take a broader and more critical view of today's heritage challenges. Can you please introduce and make the audience knowing about this book?
Book in 3 minutes.
We are in the Lahore Literary Festival,
Okay.
so
I'll give you a book and a pill. It's really, but let me give you a comment on the historical landscape, because I think it concerns many of the things that we have said.
yes,
Yeah.
okay.
We developed this, and it was under the leadership of Irina, was adopted this approach. We didn't want to do a charter. Charter are yours. We do approaches. So we called it an approach, a vision, a way to look at the thing, because we were really dissatisfied, and I hope you understand why, with the way in which the World Heritage Committee, in general, the heritage profession was looking at cities, essentially looking at historic cities as big monuments. That's not the way to look at the city. So we introduced this concept, which in a way, looks at the city as a layering process, historical, but also social and economic and so on, that has to be analyzed in all its aspects. It cannot be just defined as a large monument. It has to be seen through its to the social and economic lens. And I think this is important because a city is a city when there are people. Otherwise, it's one of your archaeological areas. I think heritage people love archaeological area, love monuments because they can close them at night. But the city you can't close it, so you can't really deal with the same principles. We were talking about authenticity. Try to think of what is authenticity applied to a city. I cannot do it because it doesn't work. Sorry. So it's one of the many contradictions. So I think that's an important concept to work on. It has been a lot now. An implementation manual of the historical landscape has been produced by UNESCO. It will come up at the committee this year in July. So I think it's a very, very important step because it will give the practitioner the way to implement it. And for my book, I will be very short because otherwise, but I tried, to take stock of my experience at UNESCO and before, and sort of see what the issues are today for heritage, because we all love heritage and we think it's beautiful, important for the future generation and so on, but heritage today is really surrounded by a lot of threats. So I look at these threats, look at this, the conditions of modernity, how modernity is really threatening the values of heritage through two optics, two angles, the internal tensions. There are a lot of internal tensions in the system, and the external pressures. I'll give you just a flash. Internal tensions are the one we discussed earlier, universalism, diversity. For instance, there's a big internal tension, but many others. Another one is the principles, authenticity, and so on. All the paraphernalia that we use in the thing is really complicated. It creates a lot of problems. There are a lot of discussion on how to implement this. There are issues that have never been discussed in the World Heritage Convention, and I'm trying now also through other NGOs and so on to put them up front. One of them, the most important one that has never ever been discussed, is the relationship between World Heritage and colonialism. There is not this word doesn't appear anywhere in any resolution of the convention. So I think it's time to look at it because it creates a lot of problems and a lot of contradictions that pop up, without the control, the restitution and this and that, and we have to put a frame on this, understand what is the relationship between this principle that we so much care about and the colonial experience. Considering that 75% of the planet went through this experience, and I think it's something that has to be brought up front, and we're trying to do it, of course. And this is internal. Then external, I look at the globalization and the impact that they had on the heritage. Development pressures of all sorts, tourism, gentrification. All sorts of things that were not in the original concept. When the principles of heritage conservation were established, mass tourism didn't exist, right? So now we have to face this as a new thing, as a new dimension. And then finally, what especially Irina dealt a lot with the issue of conflicts and new threats that are coming. Some of them are conflicts, but some of them are still have to be incorporated in the management of the convention, like climate change or other things like that. So, I think that the book is just, to put up on the table the different issues, the different problematics that we will have in the future, and try to find ways in which we can address them in a positive way.
Thank you. Please, Dr. Bokova.
Just to pick up on this fascinating discussion, which I think shows the evolution, because there is a lot of evolution in the thinking around World Heritage. I'm not a technical person, but I have seen this evolution for the last 20 years and all the different layers of understanding. Here, I would like to flag maybe three things. Now, the first, I believe this question about authenticity versus diversity or different approach, the East, the West, as we say, generally goes much deeper. It is just the way we perceive heritage. It is the way it started with the fixed heritage buildings, the Venice Charter and everything that Europe has meant, which met at some point a different approach. The approach of more spiritual, philosophical continuity in time, which was more important than strictly authenticity itself. And then, of course, it's, the Nara decision, the way, the famous case with the, I think, Ise Shrine in Japan. Every 20 years, you have to redo it, dismantle and do it. And for them, it's authentic. For the experts of ICOMOS, it's not. But this is where I believe that the UNESCO, if you look also at the evolution of the operational directives, you will see that there is a lot more of understanding and kind of reconciliation, not entirely, still there is a lot of tension, but kind of reconciliation of these two approaches in order to be more diverse and to embrace all the cultures that have heritage. And I think this is something very important. And the best example, I think, is Nepal. I went to Kathmandu after the earthquake. I went to the Durbar Square. It was a disaster. And I saw that local people were picking one by one all the pieces of wood there, putting them in the sides. It was incredible effort for them in order then to rebuild, because there was no way they were not going to rebuild these temples, just no way, albeit all these differences. And the third point is what Francesco also said, and he alluded at the beginning. I think all this understanding, enlarged, we haven't spoken about intangible heritage, but it is already in the operational directives there for the first time. It's included. This reflects another more kind of a, not European, if I may say so, side. And I think it is very important because for very many cultures, there is hardly a distinction between tangible and intangible heritage in our understanding. So this is indeed where the diversity of our contributions is being reflected. I stop here.
Thank you. Actually, I had a question for you, but we don't have time to continue in this way. If you have comments, yes. And then we open for a few questions.
Yeah. Just
okay.
one very
yes,
brief comment.
Please.
Before coming here, I looked at the Pakistani World Heritage List, and it's very strange. You have 6 sites, all of them cultural, all of them either monuments or archaeology, and the last inscription was done 28 years ago. I think that it looks like the country has been sleeping a bit on this issue. So it's time to really reopen it, because first of all, there's not only monuments and archaeology in the culture. There are many other characteristics, many other types of sites, landscapes, itineraries, and so you can enrich it enormously, even modern, some kind. And secondly, you cannot leave 28 years to go by, because in these 28 years, the old principles of conservation have evolved and so on. So, it's just a word of incentive for the country to, take back action on this and, start describing, sites again. You have a very interesting country here with a lot of things that can enrich the World Heritage list. So please push your government.
Yes. Actually, luckily, slowly things are moving. So, and Usman can perhaps say a few words, and then we go with the questions, because then they will put us out. So,
so we're in the process of revising a tentative list and fixing the current nominations, because there are still lots of documents that the state party needs to submit to the center. Yes, the government has been pretty dormant on this for a while. And some of the government officials were also asking, we haven't done this for 27 years, so can we get some extra nominations in? To which they were told, no, you can't do that, obviously. But it's a bit, I think the system's a bit more streamlined after the new operational guidelines. I think slowly understanding. I think we spent about a week doing this with them, and they're slowly understanding that it's not just going to happen just because you send in one piece of paper. There's a process that you need to follow, fulfill, So we're starting on it now.
Thank you very much. So please, questions? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh my goodness! Please be very, very short when you. There is a mic. 1, there, 1, 2, and then 3 here. 4, 5, 6 up there. Okay.
So my question relates to the Shalimar Gardens and the Orange Train. As Irina knows, that was the period when UNESCO, some of us had contacted both UNESCO and the government on the Heritage Convention and the fact that the train, when you go and visit it, is well within the 50 meters that it's supposed to be. But at the same time, it's also bringing tourists, domestic tourists, to the gardens. So how do you deal with conservation while actual damage is taking place because of the needs for the local communities, transportation, etc.? Because the way you've described conservation is after the damage, we'll go and solve it. But if the damage is daily, how does one actually deal with protecting such an important site under the Heritage Convention?
Are you going to?
I can't answer this, but I think this is Kaya's territory.
Well, there are procedures in place, but it's also a question of intent. We have the heritage impact assessments that should be done prior to finalizing. And very often it comes afterwards. So, of course, it is up to the state party to protect their heritage. So it's a question of clearly making sure that the state party seriously takes their commitment to protecting heritage. From outside, it's difficult to, it's either on the World Heritage List or off. We can put pressure on there, but it really is. So therefore, it is important for communities to put pressure to make sure that there are experts, national experts who are also there. And the tool that is being presently used is the Heritage Impact Assessment, where you actually assess it before it's implemented, but very often that comes later. So yes, it is at the national level that you have to ensure that these procedures are followed and that these pressures are put on the authorities.
There's also something additional, which is you were talking about daily damage, and there's something that we need to prepare as mandatory for World Heritage Sites, which is called a management plan. So there are procedures that you need to put in place so that the sites are managed constantly. We haven't put in a single management plan to the World Heritage Center yet.
But also, if I may just add one word to Shazia, I'm happy that she's here because 10 years ago we were speaking about that indeed at those times. And she mentioned tourism, economic activity for the local people and others. I think indeed here there should be a very good approach, sound, sustainable approach, because mass tourism does not solve problems. We're speaking about sustainable tourism. We are speaking a bit about this balance between protection of heritage and tourism. So, and of course, UNESCO doesn't have, we don't have, or ICOMOS, there is no kind of a tools to, but governments, in the end of the day, it's state party, it's the countries, the government, that should be the guardian of these principles. And holding accountable the governments by civil society, by pressure groups, local communities, I think it's critical in this. I know UNESCO has been criticized many times for similar things, but it's limited. What we can do is really working with governments, pressuring them, holding them accountable, but at the end of the day, it's in the hands of the state party. This is the reality.
I've been told that we have to close. One question, can you decide who? Okay, one question here. Okay, please, because we have to.
We don't have any program, master's program for conservation of program conservation of heritage in Pakistan. I was in concert with Sami teachers, and I started a program. I had a program approved. We made a curriculum. Curriculum was approved. We asked the Turks to help us, and I don't know what Usman Sami is doing about it. So she is the one who had to carry it forward. My second comment is that my professor Jawad Adda said, whenever you touch a building, you should realize there's some other architect who had designed it, and you should be very careful. So Kaya, that is, I think, for you.
Thank you.
So regarding the program, it's still stalled because of budget issues. The university says they don't have a budget.
On Wednesday, British Council is having a panel discussing the heritage and curricula and revision of curricula. I think if you come to this panel, we will discuss this further because I think it is really needed in the country. So, sorry, Kai, you want to complement the
I think it's just a question of what is appropriate and how do we actually, respect what is there. And it's in each case it's slightly different, but we need to work on it. And I think it is a question of intent, respect, and finding the appropriate way of dealing with each of these situations, taking the time to think through it. Yeah, I mean, that's a short answer.
Do we have students here? Young people? Okay. Can we have a question from the, sorry, but we have to, from the students? Please, one decide who. Don't fight. And please just say if you are studying or there, up there, yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Amna, I'm an archaeologist. So basically I know you guys are working on the sustainability of heritage and culture, but I want to know how the institutes are keeping up with the modern tools, the computational tools, be it machine learning, artificial intelligence, computer vision, or data scientists. And I want to know where does Pakistan stands when it comes to modern tools and conservation. Basically my thesis is about this and I want your remarks.
So pretty much everything that you talked about is in some way being used for heritage. There are GIS systems and you can collect data, you can do lots of different things. Primarily now laser scanning, etc., for documentation, etc. All of that is used in heritage, and most of it is now being used in Pakistan. It's very expensive, so it's not widespread, but it is increasing in use. So if you're good at it, there's a lot of work to do.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we need to leave the room. So thank you very much to all of you. You can continue to discuss with the panelists in case you find them outside. Thank you so much.